A millionaire in a tailored suit sits on a cold sidewalk, holding a box of cold food. Beside him, a homeless, pregnant woman. No one understands why he gave up his company and his reputation just to be by her side. But everything began on a rainy afternoon, with a single glance that changed the fate of 2 lives. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The rain had just lifted, leaving behind a dull silver sheen across the city's streets. From inside his sleek black Bentley, Gabriel Taurus waited at a red light on the corner of Franklin and 7th. The cabin was silent but comfortable. Cool air hummed softly. The scent of Italian leather mingled with cedar from his tailored suit. Everything around him reflected control, wealth, and predictability. Then his gaze drifted, idly at first, until it landed on something that made his breath catch. Across the street, beneath the crumbling awning of an abandoned building, sat a figure so still, so quiet, she almost faded into the bricks behind her. A young woman. Frail, hunched over, wrapped in a threadbare blanket that had long lost its warmth. Her hair was tangled, draping over her face like a curtain, hiding everything except the tension in her fingers, clenched around her knees. She wasn't begging. She wasn't looking. She just existed. The light turned green. A horn behind him gave a polite nudge. Gabriel pressed the gas and pulled forward, but a few seconds later, he eased off and pulled over, his brows drawn together in quiet confusion. He didn't know why he'd stopped. He had seen hundreds of homeless people before. He donated. He volunteered. He built shelters. But this felt different. She felt different. There was something about the way she sat, silent, still, like time had forgotten her, that rooted itself in his chest and refused to let go. That night, Gabriel returned to his penthouse on the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the city lights below, blinking like constellations trapped in asphalt. Dinner was waiting. Perfectly seared salmon, chilled white wine, a table set with polished silver. He sat down, knife and fork in hand. But he couldn't eat. The TV droned on with market updates and political chatter. None of it registered. His mind kept drifting back to that crumbling corner, that blanket, those hands, that face he never even fully saw. The city outside sparkled, but somewhere inside him a light had dimmed. He didn't understand why. Not yet. But something had been set in motion, and the man who once had everything no longer felt complete. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, as if the city itself had slept poorly. Gabriel Taurus returned, not because he had planned to, but because something deeper than logic had taken the wheel. The same corner, the same cracked sidewalk, the same woman. She hadn't moved. Still curled beneath that worn-out blanket, her frame looked even smaller in the morning chill. The world moved around her, heels clicking, horns blaring, life continuing as if she didn't exist, but she was still there. Gabriel parked, stepped out of his car, and approached slowly. He didn't want to startle her. Part of him still didn't know what he was doing, only that he had to be there. He stopped a few feet away. "Hi," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "I saw you yesterday. Just wanted to ask if you needed anything." She didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her face, revealing more than just tangled hair. Eyes sharp, cold, tired, but not broken. There was no fear in her gaze, just defiance, like a soldier too exhausted to fight, but too proud to surrender. "I need a lot of things," she said flatly, "but what I need most, you can't give." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't fall. It was a wall. Gabriel froze. That wasn't what he expected. Pity, maybe, or a quiet thank you. He was used to being welcomed, even if only for what he could offer. But this woman, this stranger, didn't need his help or didn't want it. He studied her face. Beneath the weariness was a kind of beauty that had nothing to do with appearance. It was the beauty of someone who had survived and didn't trust anyone who hadn't. "I didn't mean to offend," he said, hands in his coat pockets. "I just thought I'd check." Her gaze didn't soften. "Then check. I'm breathing. That's all." Silence sat between them like a third person. Gabriel nodded, slowly stepping back. "Okay," he murmured. "I'll leave you alone." He turned to go, but before he made it to the car, he paused. Without turning back, he said quietly, "I'll be around, just in case." No response. She didn't watch him leave, didn't move, but something in her expression changed, just slightly, as if his presence hadn't helped, but hadn't hurt either. And for now, that was enough. He came back the next day, and the day after that. At first, Gabriel told himself it was curiosity, then maybe guilt. But by the end of the week, even he stopped pretending. It wasn't logic that brought him to that corner. It was instinct. A quiet, insistent pull in his chest he couldn't name. She was always in the same place, sitting against the same brick wall where shadows gathered early and never fully left. The city moved around her, blurred legs, rushing shoes, coffee cups clutched like shields, but she remained still, a fixed point in the chaos. The first day he brought food, a ham and cheese sandwich in brown paper, a bottle of spring water. He placed it beside her without saying much. She didn't thank him, didn't speak. She just unwrapped the sandwich slowly and ate with careful, restrained movements, as if trying not to owe the moment anything. The second day, he brought another sandwich, but this time he added a soft muffin and coffee still warm. She looked at it longer, then looked at him. That was the first time their eyes met. No words, just a flicker of recognition. Not gratitude, not warmth, recognition. By the third visit, he noticed the way she adjusted her blanket tighter when he approached, less out of fear, more from habit. The cold had taught her not to trust comfort. So on the fourth day, he brought something different, a blanket, thick, dark gray, and new. He said nothing as he handed it to her, and she said nothing as she took it, but for a full minute, her fingers ran across the fabric. And that silence? It spoke louder than anything either of them could have said. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Gabriel, always in a coat and scarf, hands tucked into pockets, appearing around the same hour like a man reporting for duty. He never stayed long. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 15, always careful not to push. Sometimes she ate in silence. Sometimes she stared off into the street. But then, one morning, without preamble, she spoke. "Anna." Gabriel looked up. "My name," she clarified, not looking at him. "Is Anna." He waited. "Gabriel," he said finally. "I figured." A dry smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You don't exactly blend in." They sat for a while, not talking. Then another day passed, and another. On a quiet Thursday, the wind sharp with early winter, Anna spoke again, this time before he even sat down. "I had a job, you know," she said, staring ahead. Gabriel said nothing. "I was a junior accountant, firm downtown. Nothing fancy but steady." She pulled the blanket tighter. Then came the layoffs. Company restructured. I got cut. She paused, almost as if checking to see if he was judging her. He wasn't. My savings lasted 2 months. Rent was late the 3rd, and by the 5th, she looked down at her worn shoes. By then, people stopped picking up your calls. Gabriel nodded slowly. She didn't need his sympathy. She needed his silence. So he gave her that. "Shelters are full, or dangerous, or both," she added after a beat. "Sometimes it's safer out here, even if it doesn't feel that way." Another gust of wind kicked up dust from the curb. Gabriel reached into his coat and pulled out a pair of gloves. Nothing fancy, just warm. He handed them to her. She hesitated, then took them. Later that same week, they sat on the curb again. No food this time, no coffee. Just a quiet stretch of city behind them. Anna broke the silence. "You keep coming back." Gabriel glanced sideways at her. "Yeah. You think I'm broken, don't you?" "No," he said calmly. "I think you've been through hell, but not broken." She studied him carefully, as if trying to find the catch, and then she said, more softly than before, "You don't have to save me." Gabriel exhaled, slow and steady. "I'm not here to save you," he said. "I just think no one should disappear without someone noticing." That silence again. But this time, she didn't look away. When he finally rose to leave, she didn't say goodbye, but she watched him walk to the car. The first time, she hadn't looked away, and in the world she lived in, where people passed, glanced, ignored, forgot, that was something. That was everything. The sky that morning was the color of old steel, dull, cold, and unforgiving. The kind of day that made the city feel heavier than usual. Gabriel parked a little farther down the block than normal. He didn't know why. Habit, maybe, or instinct. Either way, as he stepped out, he felt the weight of something he couldn't yet name. She wasn't sitting in her usual spot. Panic flared, sharp and immediate. He scanned the sidewalk, heart racing. Then he saw her. A few yards away, hunched against the wall, one arm bracing her against the concrete, the other wrapped tightly around her middle. Something was wrong. He rushed over, his footsteps loud against the wet pavement. She looked up just as he reached her, and in that instant, Gabriel saw it. Something beyond exhaustion. Her face was pale, her lips parted like she couldn't catch her breath. Beads of sweat clung to her temples despite the cold. "Anna, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" Her mouth opened, but for a moment nothing came out. Then, calmly, quietly, almost like she'd rehearsed it. "I'm pregnant," that was all. No emotion, no apology. Just 3 words, laid bare like bones on cold stone. Gabriel blinked. It hit like a train without a sound. No thunder, no scream. Just a silence so loud it swallowed the air between them. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at her, and she stared right back. There was no plea in her eyes, no hint of vulnerability, only that same unflinching defiance, like daring him to flinch first. "I found out 2 weeks ago," she said, her voice low, almost detached. "It doesn't matter. Nothing changes." Gabriel's jaw clenched, not in judgment, not even in shock, but in something deeper, something protective, something ancient. "You don't have to. I don't want anything," she cut in, her tone sharp, "and I don't need saving." He exhaled slowly, steadily, then sat down beside her, right there on the cold concrete, his coat soaking up the damp from the ground. "Okay," he said, voice calm. "But what about the baby?" She hesitated, just for a second, then, "It's just me. That's how it's always been." His gaze didn't shift. "It doesn't have to stay that way." She laughed, bitter and brief. "Why? You gonna take me home, wrap me in cashmere, play house with someone who sleeps on sidewalks?" "No," he said simply. "I'm just not leaving you here. Not like this." Her hands moved instinctively over her belly, an unconscious gesture she didn't seem to notice. "I've made it this far," she whispered. "I can do it alone." Gabriel didn't argue, didn't reach out. He just stayed, and in that silence, something shifted, not loudly, not obviously, but deeply, because some truths don't need to be shouted. They land harder in the quiet. The sky that morning was the color of old steel, dull, cold, and unforgiving. The kind of day that made the city feel heavier than usual, Gabriel parked a little farther down the block than normal. He didn't know why. Habit, maybe, or instinct. Either way, as he stepped out, he felt the weight of something he couldn't yet name. She wasn't sitting in her usual spot. Panic flared, sharp and immediate. He scanned the sidewalk, heart racing. Then he saw her, a few yards away, hunched against the wall, one arm bracing her against the concrete, the other wrapped tightly around her middle. Something was wrong. He rushed over, his footsteps loud against the wet pavement. She looked up just as he reached her, and in that instant, Gabriel saw it, something beyond exhaustion. Her face was pale, her lips parted like she couldn't catch her breath. Beads of sweat clung to her temples despite the cold. "Anna, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" Her mouth opened, but for a moment, nothing came out. Then, calmly, quietly, almost like she'd rehearsed it. "I'm pregnant," that was all. No emotion, no apology. Just 3 words, laid bare like bones on cold stone. Gabriel blinked. It hit like a train without a sound. No thunder, no scream. Just a silence so loud it swallowed the air between them. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at her, and she stared right back. There was no plea in her eyes, no hint of vulnerability, only that same unflinching defiance, like daring him to flinch first. "I found out 2 weeks ago," she said, her voice low, almost detached. "It doesn't matter. Nothing changes." Gabriel's jaw clenched, not in judgment, not even in shock, but in something deeper, something protective, something ancient. "You don't have to—" "I don't want anything," she cut in, her tone sharp. "And I don't need saving." He exhaled slowly, steadily, then sat down beside her, right there on the cold concrete, his coat soaking up the damp from the ground. "Okay," he said, voice calm. "But what about the baby?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then, "It's just me. That's how it's always been." His gaze didn't shift. "It doesn't have to stay that way." She laughed, bitter and brief. "Why? You gonna take me home, wrap me in cashmere, play house with someone who sleeps on sidewalks?" "No," he said simply. "I'm just not leaving you here. Not like this." Her hands moved instinctively over her belly, an unconscious gesture she didn't seem to notice. "I've made it this far," she whispered. "I can do it alone." Gabriel didn't argue, didn't reach out. He just stayed. And in that silence, something shifted, not loudly, not obviously, but deeply, because some truths don't need to be shouted. They land harder in the quiet. The rain had returned by early evening, not a storm, but a steady, cold drizzle that soaked through collars and made the city feel lonelier than usual. Gabriel didn't speak much as he drove, and Anna didn't ask where they were going. She just stared out the window, arms wrapped around her stomach, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing for something she wasn't ready to name. The building stood tall against the slate sky, all glass and stone, reflecting a world she no longer belonged to. When the elevator doors opened to the penthouse, silence followed them in. Anna stepped cautiously inside, her worn sneakers tracking water onto hardwood floors polished to a mirror sheen. The space was immaculate, modern, open, filled with warm lamplight and clean lines. A place designed to feel like peace. But to her, it felt like another planet. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood still in the center of the living room, shoulders tight, fingers curled slightly at her sides. Her eyes scanned the room, not with awe, but with suspicion. Everything was too clean, too expensive, too far from the street where her life had been quietly unraveling. Gabriel slipped off his coat, hung it by the door. He didn't crowd her, didn't speak right away. He just let the silence settle between them, waiting. Then, finally, her voice cut through it. "I didn't ask for this." He turned, met her eyes. "I know." Her fingers twitched, knuckles whitening. You think this helps? Bringing me here like I'm a project? Her voice trembled, but not from weakness, from control, from holding back too much for too long. I don't need your pity, she said, sharper now. I don't want it. Gabriel stood a few feet away, unmoving. I'm not offering pity. Then what is this? She snapped. You pick up a stray on the street and think you're doing something noble? No, he said calmly. I picked up a human being, one who deserves to feel safe. The air went still. Anna's throat bobbed. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked hard and fast, forcing it down. She looked away. I don't feel safe, she said quietly. I know, he replied, just as quietly. I don't trust this. You don't have to. Silence again. She stepped forward once, then paused. Why me? Gabriel took a breath, deep, steady. Because every time I walk away, I think about you. Because no one should have to go through what you're going through. Alone. And because whether you want me to or not, I care. He didn't say it with drama. He said it like a truth that had settled deep and quiet inside him. Anna closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not disappeared, but softened. I'm not good at this, she whispered. Being taken care of. You don't have to be good at it, he said. You just have to let someone try. She nodded once, just barely. Then finally, without a word, she stepped out of her wet shoes, dropped her threadbare bag beside the couch, and sat. Not because she trusted him yet, but because for the first time in a long time, her body didn't feel the need to stay standing. Monday morning arrived like a slap to the face. Gabriel stepped into the sleek marble lobby of Taurus Holdings, coffee in hand, but the usual rhythm was off. The security guard glanced up and quickly looked away. An intern near the elevators pretended to check her phone. Even the elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer, like the walls themselves were listening. By the time he stepped into the boardroom, the air was thick. Not with silence, but with something worse. Judgment, the kind people don't voice, but carry in their glances and smirks. He took his seat at the head of the table. Ricardo Brooks, head of finance, was already waiting. Armani suit, silver cufflinks, that patented corporate smirk glued to his face. Gabriel had known men like him his entire life, ambitious, well-spoken, and hollow beneath the polish. So, Ricardo began drumming his fingers, we should probably talk about your new guest. A few nervous chuckles around the table. Gabriel said nothing. You brought a homeless woman into your home, didn't you? Ricardo continued, eyes glittering with smug curiosity. I mean, that's what people are saying. One of the junior VPs, young, eager to impress, murmured, Pretty generous of you, sir. Though I didn't realize we were running a charity branch. More laughter, this time louder. Gabriel placed his coffee down, slowly, deliberately. His hands were steady, his expression unreadable. Then he stood. The room quieted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Yes, Gabriel said, voice calm but laced with steel. I brought someone into my home. Someone who's been ignored, discarded, judged by people too comfortable to see beyond their own reflections. He paused, scanning the table. And let me be very clear. If the fact that I'm helping a pregnant woman who's been living on the street somehow offends your polished sensibilities, the door's right behind you. Silence. Dead, stifling silence. No one moved. No one laughed. Even Ricardo leaned back, his smirk gone, replaced by something tighter, smaller. You built this company, he said almost accusingly. But don't forget, Gabriel, reputation is currency. Gabriel turned, his gaze sharp as glass. Then maybe it's time we redefined what worth really means. A beat passed. Then he walked out, leaving his coffee untouched and the room frozen in place. The rain had begun sometime after midnight. Soft at first, then steadier, as if the sky itself was trying to speak without words. The penthouse was silent, too silent. No music played, no TV hummed in the background. Just the faint ticking of a wall clock and the distant hum of city life, muffled by thick glass and altitude. Gabriel had fallen asleep on the couch, still in his dress shirt, tie loosened, an untouched cup of tea cooling on the table. He hadn't meant to sleep. He was waiting for Anna to come out of the bedroom, to say something, anything. But the door had stayed closed. When he woke, the world was gray and wet, and she was gone. He noticed it first in the stillness of the room, the absence of her coat, the soft blanket folded on the couch instead of draped where she'd been. The quiet, too complete, too final. Then his eyes landed on the note, a single piece of paper, placed gently beside the business card he'd once given her, the same one she used to trace the edges of with uncertain fingers. Now it lay untouched, abandoned. He reached for the note with hands that felt suddenly too large, too clumsy. The handwriting was neat, small, careful. Gabriel, you've given me more than the world ever did. But I can't let you lose everything because of me. Thank you for making me believe, just once, that I was worth loving. Anna. The words didn't shout, they didn't plead, they just landed, like the first drop of rain against bare skin, cold, soft, unforgettable. Gabriel stood frozen for a long time, holding the letter like it might break if he moved too quickly. His breath caught in his throat, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Helpless. He turned toward the window. The city below was bathed in rain, streaking down the glass like tears that couldn't fall fast enough. He didn't run after her, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know where to start. So he sat, back on the same couch, note still in hand, shoulders slumped like someone who'd been hit, not with violence, but with absence. And that's when it happened. The first tear came quiet, surprising. Then another. No rage, no shouting, no fists through walls. Just a man in an empty room, holding a piece of paper like it was the last piece of her he had, and crying for the first time in a life full of power and silence. Not all heartbreaks are loud. Some arrive like rain at night, soft, steady, and impossible to stop. Gabriel didn't remember grabbing his keys. He barely remembered the door slamming shut behind him. All he knew was that Anna was gone, and every second that passed without knowing where she was felt like his lungs were folding in on themselves. The city was slick with rain, its streets glossy and disorienting under the dim haze of early morning light. He drove with one hand, the other tapping nervously against the steering wheel, checking corners, benches, alleyways, shelters. Anywhere she might have wandered, or worse, collapsed. He asked shop owners, street sweepers, people curled beneath awnings. No one had seen her. Then, sirens, far off, faint, but they cut through the air like a wire drawn taut. He turned hard, tires screeching against wet asphalt. The park. He didn't even remember parking. He ran, through the gates, past the stone fountain, toward the flash of red and blue that pulsed against the dark trees like a heartbeat. A crowd had gathered, clutching umbrellas, whispering, staring. He pushed through them, chest pounding. That's when he saw her. Anna, collapsed on the ground, soaked through, her hair matted to her face, her arms cradled protectively around her belly, even in unconsciousness. Two paramedics were crouched beside her, moving with urgency. One was speaking into a radio, the other checked her vitals. Gabriel's throat closed. He stumbled forward, breath catching. She's my wife, he shouted, voice cracking. Please, one of the medics held up a hand instinctively until he saw Gabriel's eyes, wide, wild, pleading.
She's very weak, the medic said quickly. Dehydrated, possibly hypothermic. We're not sure about the baby's condition yet. Gabriel nodded, barely hearing. His eyes stayed locked on Anna. He dropped to his knees beside the stretcher as they lifted her, gripping the cold metal frame like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice trembling as the rain fell harder. "Anna, stay with me. Please." A mask was placed over her mouth. The ambulance doors swung open. They hoisted her inside. Gabriel climbed in after her without asking permission. No one stopped him. The doors slammed shut, muting the world outside. Inside the ambulance, the light was harsh, sterile. Machines beeped. A medic shouted numbers. Gabriel didn't move. He just held her hand, cold, damp, fragile, and for the first time since he met her, she looked small, not fierce, not guarded, just human. He bent his head, forehead resting against her knuckles. Whatever storm this was, he wasn't letting go. Not now. Not ever. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and worry. Outside Anna's room, the hallway was dim and hushed, the kind of stillness that made every footstep echo louder than it should. Machines beeped faintly behind the door, steady and rhythmic, reassuring in their own way. Anna had made it through the night. The doctors called it a close call. Dehydration, stress, exposure. It could have gone the other way. But it didn't. She was still here, and now she was resting, her face pale but peaceful, a quiet strength still etched into every exhausted breath. Gabriel sat beside her, hands folded in his lap, back straight, eyes alert. He hadn't left since the ambulance, hadn't changed, hadn't eaten. He didn't care. His world in that moment was that room, that bed, that woman. Then the door opened, and a ghost walked in. Pedro, the biological father, the man who vanished the moment Anna told him she was pregnant, the man who had left her on the streets without a second thought, now dressed in a crisp shirt, wearing concern like a costume. He entered slowly, his expression a blend of practiced guilt and phony sympathy. "Anna," he said softly, taking a step toward the bed. Gabriel stood, not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough. Pedro paused. "She doesn't need you here," Gabriel said, voice level but cold as glass. "You had your chance. You chose to walk away." Pedro tried to recover, offering a half smile. "I didn't know it would get this bad. I just came to see how she's doing." Gabriel didn't blink. "She nearly died." Pedro's smile faltered. "She's carrying my child," he added, his tone tightening. That did it. Gabriel took one slow step forward, his gaze locked, controlled, dangerous. "She's not carrying a label. She's carrying life. A life you wanted no part of until it might make headlines." Pedro opened his mouth to argue, but Gabriel cut him off. "You don't get to show up now and play hero. You don't get to insert yourself into her story just because the world's watching. You abandoned her. I didn't. I was there when she collapsed. I was there in the ambulance, and I'm here now, because I never left." Silence hung heavy between them. Pedro shifted, jaw tightening. "You don't decide what's best for my kid." Gabriel's voice dropped lower, quieter, sharper. "I'm not deciding anything. I'm protecting everything." Pedro's gaze flicked to Anna, then back to Gabriel. He saw it now, the line he couldn't cross, the man who wouldn't move. "This isn't over," Pedro muttered, before turning toward the door. Gabriel didn't respond. He just watched him go, calm and unshaken. Then he turned back to Anna, gently reaching for her hand again. She hadn't stirred during the exchange, but her fingers curled ever so slightly around his, and that was all he needed. The headlines hit like a virus, fast, unforgiving,
Sensational. Millionaire seduced by pregnant homeless woman. Corporate king loses his crown to a street girl. From penthouse to pity case, the fall of Gabriel Taurus. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital. Social media erupted. Investors whispered, and the board demanded silence. Gabriel chose a microphone instead. He stood at the front of a modest conference room, not with lawyers flanking him, not in front of a row of PR-approved talking points, just a single mic, a plain podium, and a truth that had waited long enough. The room quieted the moment he stepped forward. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned in, every eye focused, expecting damage control. What they got was something else. He looked up, calm, certain. I know what's been said. I've read the headlines. I've seen the smirks. And I'm here to say, you're all looking at this the wrong way. A pause.
Anna is not a scandal. She's not a tabloid twist or a PR problem. She's a woman, a survivor, someone who's walked through things most of you wouldn't last a week in. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He leaned in. While the rest of us were sitting in leather chairs making deals and sipping imported coffee, she was fighting to stay alive. Pregnant. Alone. Freezing on a street corner. And yet, she never begged, never asked for rescue. She carried herself with more grace in rags than I've seen in most boardrooms. His voice grew steadier, every word deliberate. I didn't save her. She saved me. From a life so comfortable I forgot what being human felt like. She reminded me that love isn't earned through wealth, but through presence, through sacrifice, through choosing someone, even when it's hard. He let that settle. So no, Anna doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Not me, not the press, not the world. He looked into the sea of lenses, his gaze sharp but full of conviction. I'm not ashamed to stand beside her. I'm proud, because I am the lucky one. I am the man she trusted, when trusting anyone should have been impossible. He stepped back. That's the story. No follow-up, no spin, just silence and respect. Across the city, in a quiet hospital room, Anna watched from a small TV mounted to the wall. Her hand rested gently on her belly. Tears welled. Not from shame, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging, because for the first time, the world wasn't speaking over her. It was listening. It was a quiet afternoon in the park, one of those late spring days where the sun filtered gently through the trees and everything felt softer, slower. The world wasn't performing. It was just breathing. Gabriel and Anna walked side by side along a narrow path lined with benches and small bursts of blooming daisies. A light breeze teased strands of her hair across her cheek, and she didn't bother brushing them away. Her steps were slower now, not just because of the baby, but because, for once, there was nowhere else she had to be. They talked about small things. Sandwiches that had too much mustard, baby names that made them laugh, the way ducks always seem to travel in pairs. And then they stopped, right beneath an old maple tree with bark scarred by initials carved decades ago. Gabriel took a breath, glanced around, and then knelt, not with fanfare, not with a velvet box or a string quartet, but with a sincerity that stilled the air. Anna blinked, caught off guard. He looked up at her, eyes steady. "You're not a miracle, Anna," he said, his voice low and certain. "You're not some fairy tale or some fragile story that needs protecting." She tilted her head, unsure. "You're real," he continued, "and strong, and stubborn, and brave in ways you'll probably never admit. And I don't want perfect. I want you, exactly as you are. The good days, the hard ones, all of it." He reached into his coat pocket, not for a ring box, but for something simpler. A small silver band, worn slightly at the edges, like it had been in his pocket for a while, waiting. Will you marry me? He asked. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because I want to live it all with you. Anna didn't speak at first. She just stared at him, as if trying to measure whether this was real, this man, this moment, this strange turn of a life that once seemed destined only for survival. Then quietly, she nodded and smiled, not the practiced smile she'd worn in the shelter lines, not the tight one she gave strangers when they tried to pity her, but a smile that came from somewhere deep, the kind of smile that hadn't had a reason to appear in years. A couple nearby clapped, surprised and unsure, but warm. A child squealed, a dog barked, and the world kept going, unaware that something quiet but extraordinary had just taken root. Gabriel stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and pulled her close. No speeches, no music, just her hand in his, and a future they were no longer afraid to imagine. Because sometimes love doesn't come with fireworks or violins. Sometimes it just kneels down in a public park, speaks the truth, and is finally heard. The ceremony was small, just close friends, soft lights, and a sky that turned gold as they exchanged vows. Anna wore a simple white dress. Gabriel couldn't stop looking at her. Little Laura, their daughter, waddled down the aisle with a flower crown too big for her head. Everyone laughed and then cried a little. Gabriel's mother, once cold and distant, leaned in and whispered to Anna as she held Laura, "Thank you for bringing him back to life." That night, the house was filled with candlelight, laughter, and something rarer, peace. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and let us know. How would you rate this story from 1 to 10? What are your thoughts on Gabriel and Anna's love story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a love that defied judgment like this? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every story means more when someone connects with it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful and heartfelt story.